So, hello everybody, it's Simon Güntner and me is Christoph Reinbrecht, and we very much welcome you here. We have a hybrid situation as we have it at the moment everywhere in academic world, and not only in academics. That means that we have a shared classroom with some participants. We have participants being with us connected via WebEx. And we have a wider auditorium following us via video streaming, so to say, YouTube streaming. And we try to manage it more or less, and I think it will be a very fruitful exchange. Maybe to say some words about the idea. You see it here. We have since 3 years. This year is the third year. We are organizing a research lab, a summer school dedicated to social housing, new social housing, in connection with the IBA Wien. The IBA is the International Building Exhibition. This is a very unique instrument which has been founded in the 20th century in Germany. Maybe we can speak later a bit more about that, but I think for the second time, it is an IBA which is organized outside Germany, or maybe the first time, and it is in Vienna, dedicated to social housing. So this is in the long tradition, related to the long tradition, municipal and social housing in Vienna. We will speak about in a few minutes more. So the idea is the IBA is more or less something which is very much connected with the city of Vienna and the social housing policy of Vienna. And we said, okay, what we as academics were very much interested in housing studies and housing affairs. And the interesting thing in Vienna is that we have Technical University, the Wirtschaftsschule, business school, we have the University of Vienna, geography, sociology, psychology, I don't know. But there is not such a thing like a research cluster. We have a long tradition in Vienna in social housing, but it's a very fragmented social housing studies, finally. So that's a fascinating thing if you compare it, for example, to France or Great Britain, the United Kingdom, where I have a very strong tradition in housing research. You have a much less strong tradition here, even you have a very strong housing policy tradition. So we said, okay, maybe we should benefit from this IBA to try to organize a kind of research lab. For the moment, the research lab is a summer school. So once a year we meet with colleagues like you, we make a call. This year it was a very particular context with the COVID-19 crisis. So the number of fellows have been reduced to the crisis, but we decided anyway to continue and to do it and to go on. And the idea finally is to bring together young researchers, practitioners, and people interested in housing studies to discuss research, to discuss new perspectives on housing issues, and to connect people from Vienna, but also from international, different international perspectives, academics and practitioners at the same time. So we have, this is more or less the main idea, and maybe Simon, you would like to add something. So I'm a sociologist. I'm coming from the field of sociology, and Simon, he also is sociologist, but he is now professor of spatial sociology at the Technical University. Yeah.
And I just stay for the moment close to the computer so that I can continue clicking things. But actually, before, because I just heard from someone over YouTube that they can see you now. It's me. I'm sitting behind the computer. I'm Simon. I'm the second coordinator, and I'd just like to add to what Christoph has just said, that we started in 2018, and the idea is to contribute with international research to the International Building Exhibition that will happen in 2020. So we have a 5 years program, 2018, 19, 20, 21, and 22. And each year we select a different theme. And in 2022, there will be a huge conference to sum the whole thing up. We started in 2018. Are you fine with me going through these?
Yeah.
We started in 2018 with something that was at that time and still is very, very important for the city of Vienna, which is we looked at the transformation of large-scale housing. Much of the social housing stock that we have in Vienna is large-scale from the 1920s and mainly 1960s and 70s. Some of these buildings are in need of renovation, and at the same time there's generational change, there's social change, and we looked at international examples of how to manage this transformation, which are the challenges, and how can we go about this. And one of the key questions, one of the crucial questions that actually came up then was what is social housing actually? We had many people from different continents, and when they came to Vienna and to the estates, and they heard how these are managed, how these are run, and who is managing them and running them, and that we have a differentiation between municipal housing, and then we have non-profit housing providers. To some of them, that was quite new. So we decided to ask that question last year in the summer school: what is social about social housing? That was a very deep discussion, and we'll show something about it in a minute. And one of the main things we took from there, that is really a political issue on how you define social. There can be many dimensions to it. And after that discussion, we sat together and ourselves what should be the next theme that is equally important for us in the research community as for the city and its policies. And we talked about the negotiation between ecological issues and social issues in social housing, in particular with regard to the refurbishment of the large-scale housing estates. Of course, that implies costs, and that again has been some impact, of course, on the people who live there, on the rent, and on the composition of the social structure in these areas. So we decided this year to look at the relation between our strategies to adapt social housing to climate change, in particular with regard to heating and strong weather conditions, or how do you say, extreme weather conditions, which are two crucial problems in Vienna. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to gather experience from all over the world that is bottom up and locally coordinated. So because the city cares about participation and tries to engage communities. We'll talk about this in a minute. We did not want to look at top-down solutions and efficiency issues, but much more about equality issues and participation. Should we say more about the International Building Exhibition? I think that's fine.
No, only one word more, that as Simon said, it is an exhibition 2022, and this year we have an interim exhibition, so to say, so the state of the art of the process, and it is now running in the so-called West area, where we will have tomorrow the evening debate, the panel discussion, and we maybe will have the also time to go through the exhibition tomorrow. But I think this is something very interesting, that the city of Vienna is being engaged in the promotion of new models of social housing, and the ecological dimension, of course, is one aspect which is very important. But I think for the moment, it's enough to say about the IBA. But we are very happy, only to say we are not IBA, we're not part of the IBA, but we are financed and supported by the IBA office and the city of Vienna organizing this research lab, and we are very happy about that, of course.
Before you start with the introduction of the history, would you come here? Because people following the YouTube stream tell me that the acoustic is much better than when we're sitting here.
Ah, okay.
And they can still see us.
Good.
Can the WebEx people see us too when we're sitting here?
No.
Because on the YouTube channel you can see us. Yuri, can you see me?
No.
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 We can see just the head of Christoph Katt.
Yeah.
Always. Now, not anymore.
Yeah. But I think no, it's okay. So
It's okay. Yeah.
it's okay because we will try to say a few words about social housing in Vienna, and only to start and to give a short reminder to the last year's research lab, and then we go through the program and we will start the afternoon session. So, of course, to say a few words, why social housing, new social housing, why the IBA, why our research lab. Of course, as I already mentioned, everybody know that is knowing this, that Vienna is very well known for its social housing policies going back 100 years. We had last year, it was the 100 year of Red Vienna social housing, municipal housing policy. And you see here 4 pictures going through the history, so to say. The first building is the Mettlersdorfer Platz in the famous ring road of the proletariat in the more or less inner city area. Then you have the post-war mass housing, as you had a tower of the 1950s, and a very well-known, international well-known construction of the 1970s, the Wohnpark Alt-Erla of the architect Harry Glück, which is very famous for the very, very developed, quality of this building. That means you have a swimming pool on the roof, you have so kind of vertical gardening, a very early example for the kind of architecture. So that everybody has a free room, free space, and so on. So the aspects, the focus on the quality of life, and quality of housing. And then today we have a huge construction areas in Vienna, because Vienna is again a growing city. And one of the examples is the also internationally well-known example is the Seestadt Aspern, where until 2028, around 20,000 people will live there. So this is a completely newly constructed town, so to say, in the northeastern part of Vienna. Yeah, so what you can see is we have a long history, and it's I will not go into details, only to say that today, of course, this history is challenged, like everywhere in the world, the history of the position of social housing. But the particularity of Vienna is that the social housing takes quite a huge part of the housing stock finally. So we say in Vienna that around 60% of people are living in subsidized housing. And this is something, especially because our colleagues sitting in the room are coming from Prague. This is, for example, in so-called post-socialist countries, a unique experience, because you're coming from countries where after '89, there had been a very strong liberalization process, and the public housing, so to say, had a more or less a negative connotation. And here, if 60% or 60% of people are living in subsidized housing, not necessarily in municipal housing, it is a kind of normalization. That means it is not connotated negatively, it is normalized. So to say, it is a normal living situation of people here in Vienna. And this is very unique. But, and it's around the most important part of this is municipal housing. So if you take 100% of social subsidized housing, you have around 60% of that is municipal housing. But the subsidized housing, the non-municipal social housing is growing, the stock is growing, and it's becoming more and more differentiated. what is important is that a huge part, of the housing market is controlled under or regulated. That means rents are lower, and tenant contracts are more under control and more regulated. So, for example, if you take the housing prices, these are the data from 2018, I think. It's around €7.70 compared to €12 per average in Vienna. So the private renting market is very much, the prices are increasing very strongly. So you have very strong, and the price level in the subsidized housing market is relatively stable. There are nevertheless certain criteria for coming in. One is income, but the income level is very high, as you can see. So it's €45,000 per year net. It's a very high level. That means that the majority of population has, from that concerning that criteria, it's accessible for them. But there are other criteria, for example, principal residence in Vienna, or social criteria, for example, housing needs or family status, family situation, age, and so on and so on. So, of course, it is selective, and in the non-municipal social housing, you also have down payments if you enter, and so on and so on. So it is, if you have 60% of people living in that segment, it becomes clear that it is not a homogeneous segment. It is quite differentiated and, you can say, fragmented. So in the municipal segment, so in the segment which maybe have the lowest costs, the lowest rent, there we have an increasing waiting list. As you can see, in 10 years, around 140% increase of waiting list. So people are, and this is related to the fact that we can go on, that the housing situation is related to urban growth. Vienna is a very strong growing city. There are estimation that maybe in 2100, well, it's a long time to go, but that there will be 3 million. We don't know. These are estimations, are always problematic. But for the moment, we started with 1.5 million. It's 25 years ago, and now we have 2 million. So it's a very strong growth. We have a very important structural, social, cultural diversification. So more or less 40% of people have a migration background today, 32% of foreign born. We have a rising rent situation where the private sector is becoming more and more costly, more and more expensive. We have, as everywhere, deep structural changes in the labor market and economic situation. And this produces a situation where, of course, the housing precarity, poverty, homelessness are becoming more and more, so to say, the social issues of social housing, or the social issues of housing policy becoming more and more important. To relate again to the IBA programmatic statement, what is interesting here is that coming from against the background of the Viennese housing policy, 100-year tradition, the programmatic statement is not only on construction activity, that's very important, but on quality, and quality in three elements. The main focus is even not on housing construction and quality of housing construction. The first is on new social neighborhoods. It means the perspective is that if you construct housing, this housing has to be part of the city, of city building, of urban development. The second is taking into account changing social realities, more mobility, changing living situations, changing family situation, changing labor market conditions, and so on. And the third one is who is responsible, who is actor, who is integrated in this field. And this implies not only the public authorities or public actors, but also private actors, or especially in Vienna, the very strong third market cooperative sector of the housing association. Yeah, so that's to say only a few words. So of course in Vienna we also have a big debate on housing issues, even comparing to many other countries, not only Central European countries, but also, for example, Germany, where a strong privatization policy had taken place in the 1990s, and most of municipal housing stock had been privatized. Vienna refused to do so, and so we have a unique situation in Central Europe with a very strong, but strong public sector, social segment, but which is challenged also by public debate and so on and so on. Yeah, so this is only to justify why we think it is good and necessary to connect discussions on housing issues with the social housing aspect of social housing today, the changing meaning of social housing. Timo.
Yeah, I'd like to take off from here and continue, and just like to emphasize one of the things that Christoph mentioned in passing. The housing policy and the housing situation in Vienna, in particular the social housing policy, is in international comparison rather unique. But something specific about Vienna is that people here, that we tend to take it for granted. So for us, it is like this. It's always been like this. Social housing is a big local welfare state providing housing. That is what we think it is. But many people don't think like this. And many people are surprised about this. And there are many issues, many critical issues around this. If you have a large organization governing the whole thing. Yeah, in particular, when we talk about participation, of course, there's limits to participation when 60% of the local population is managed by one organization, or at least challenges. And then there's a question of who is governing this, and what's the relation between Wiener Wohnen, which is the organization, and the local political system. You can imagine that there's many questions, and in a democratic city like Vienna, these questions for the moment until now have been solved in good ways, with the result that this is certainly one of the reasons why Vienna has repeatedly been referred to as a very livable, or the most livable city. But at the same time, it is prone to more critical issues, and there are quite a few questions. And so we decided last year to take the opportunity of such an international research exchange to ask others, what do you think, what is in your context about social housing, and how do you see what you're seeing, what is happening here in Vienna? And we invited about 20 colleagues from around the world to present what strategies and policies and practices they have back home, and then to look at what's happening in Vienna through their eyes. And one crucial learning point for me personally was that most of the examples we heard had something to do with informality. Yeah, that in many regions around the world, social housing has a strong informal element. It's people, it's self-help, self-built projects, which along the way at some point are maybe formalized, but the informal aspect has always something. That there's also an informal aspect. And actually there's a huge informal aspect to the Viennese situation as well. Because when we go down to the question of how does someone get to her or his apartment, how do you get an apartment, one of these many apartments which are really cheap compared to the others? There's a huge gap between the private market and the municipal one. Then we get down to informal networks and who knows what, and imbalances in information, etc. And also to a bit of bordering, because it's quite high thresholds, as Christoph just mentioned, You cannot just move to Vienna and think you get access to these houses. Yeah, you need to be here for a while. You need to tick many boxes before you can enter. So that was quite astonishing to many of the people who came here. And what you see in the middle of this slide is the result of our final discussion, where we asked people, what did you take from this? What do you think is striking about the social housing situation in Vienna? And one of the things that someone wrote down was exclusionary inclusion. So for many people, this system works very well. But for quite a few people, it doesn't work at all because they don't get in. This is particular for newcoming migrants because one of the thresholds that you pass is you need to have been living in Austria for 5 years before you qualify for municipal housing and a few other things. So it was clear it works for many, but not for all. The other thing was that these people who it doesn't work for, who don't have access, are actually the very poor, are the ones who are prone to exclusion, because those people who don't have jobs or who have unqualified jobs or very low paid jobs are often migrants who don't qualify for the apartments. So we entered a discussion which was dominating a bit the local political discussions as well, about housing the poor or housing for all. Yeah, whilst housing for all, in the way that the city of Vienna talks about it, is not actually not for all, but for very many. Yeah, so there's a bit of a discrepancy here. So that was the result, or one of the results of our research lab last year. And as I mentioned earlier, we took these findings into our discussions for this year's theme, and we thought it was necessary to look at all the strategies and policies that are implemented at the moment with regard to climate adaptation, because they add another burden. There's a term that has been used at the moment by quite a few people in the European discussions, which is about renovictions, which is about people being thrown out of their apartments because of the renovation of the renovation of the apartment, and afterward, or the house, and afterwards the rents being increased. And much of this is legitimized because the landlords are saying this is due to the need to adapt to climate change and to retrofitting and to better environmental standards, etc. So we thought, in addition to the stress or the issues that we have here at the moment, this is certainly something, this balance between the social and the ecological questions, that we should look at. And how do we best look at this? It's always good to learn from others. Let's see how it is done elsewhere. And we particularly wanted to look outside Austria, and if possible outside Europe as well, and ask colleagues, and then I had a call out to say, do you know about bottom-up and local perspective about climate adaptation, which are not working against the people who are living in these houses, but which are driven by those people, and who hopefully prevent crowding out or rising costs that then eventually cause people having food. So we asked a few very basic questions, which is, what do we know? Let's very straightforward. Let's assemble good practice. Let's see what is out there, and use this to discuss here in Vienna. That's what we'll do tomorrow evening with local policymakers, with architects and planners, what we can learn from this. But this also, of course, includes issues around trade-offs and obstacles. Yeah. So what do we know about these practices? And we're very happy for the selection of practices that we will discuss later today and in the next days. And actually, one of the presentations we'll have later this afternoon will actually be about Vienna. So whilst we stop here, giving more detail about the current situation here, you'll see more in the films that will come in 15 minutes, and then later on in another presentation by Michael Friesenecker, who's online already and has joined us. But then, as a bit of a kind of to guide the research, we asked, how do these local and bottom-up initiatives come about? You know, why do people come together and do this? Do they do it because they have a need, that they see a collective need, or do they do it because they're pushed to it, or what what is triggering these initiatives? And then that's an old question that we actually have to, with regard to all urban movements and social change. How can they become sustainable? Are they, you know, which obstacles did they have along the way from the first idea? Then when they wanted to roll out and install sustainable changes. The architectural and planning dimension to this is related to the infrastructure that is needed. Much of the infrastructure for social housing that's been there here in Vienna, for instance, has not been there to provide to help cooling or shelter, but there were other reasons. One of the examples that are discussed here, actually a new which social housing providers are discussing at the moment, is how can you use heating systems for cooling? That's a question that nobody asked 5 years ago, right? These are new things, but then we come to the question of who is providing the energy and who is providing the water, and which implications do these changes have for the relations to the providers. So that is a question we'll focus on tomorrow morning. And the third question that we ask is then also maybe straightforward about the design. How, you know, which urban design, which architecture, with regards to new built houses, but also with regard to the transformation to houses that have not been built in such a way, seem to be transversal, seem to be promising, seem to might be an inspiration also for the situation here in Vienna. So that is what we have in front of us for today, for this afternoon, and for tomorrow. And we're going to, or do you want to talk about?
Yeah. No, it's only to give a short overview what we will do today, tomorrow. We have today one afternoon session focusing on bottom-up strategies, and tomorrow we have one where we integrated two sessions to one session because one participant had to cancel his participation, and so we will discuss blue-green infrastructures and design-related questions. And the afternoon tomorrow, we will, those who are in Vienna, we will continue our activities by going visiting two sites in the 10th district in Vienna. One is a top-down project, it's Weidop City. And from there we will, which is quite interesting, we will have a guided tour there, and then we will continue to a more bottom-up initiative, which is called 50 Green Houses, and maybe to an even more locally organized activity in the area. And the evening we will have a panel discussion, which will, we don't know exactly, maybe it will be held maybe in German, but maybe in English, we don't know yet. It depends a bit on how we decide here. So the focus is on bridging on the conflict, goal conflict, so to say, related to social and ecological issues, environmental issues. Yeah, this is the program, and only to say a few words about our wonderful faculty. So we have invited, and it was really great that so many colleagues have accepted to participate this year. Laura Collini, I'm sorry for wrong spelling. Laura from Berlin, Céline de Cruz, she's at the moment in Bangladesh, the International Center for Climate Change and Development. Roberta Kuka, she had been for some years here in Vienna, but now she's professor in Oslo. Abdul Malik Simone, he's not yet here. I think he's University of Sheffield, an urbanist. Yuri Kasepov, who is professor of sociology here at our department, Sasha Rössler, who is an architect and professor for architecture theory at the Academy of Architecture in Switzerland, Frank Donkis, she's professor of sociology at LSE, and Sophie Watson, but I think she is ill and she will not be with us tomorrow, join us tomorrow. So a wonderful faculty, and the idea is to have an open exchange. The members of the faculty will give some statements, and will also respond, of course, to your research. And so we have an intense and enriching exchange. This is the main idea. And unfortunately, it is only on virtual dimensions. So we have not the possibility to continue in a more sociable context later on together. Yeah, tomorrow evening we discuss with Helga Fassbinder. She is the chairperson of Bidop City. She is the designer as an urban planner. With Thomas Madreiter, who is a planning director, and Susanne Formanek, who is a member of an initiative she developed focusing on innovative technologies, green technologies in urban context in rebuild. And Amila Cibekovic from IBA will moderate. So the idea tomorrow evening is, as we always did, we will have a debate, we will have field contact, and we bring afterwards our results into a field where people are involved also with projects of the IBA and the city of Vienna. So the idea is always not to have a completely, so to say, an island experience, so disconnected from these policies, from urban policies, but to reconnect our insights and our learning to the field of housing policy. Yeah. So this is one possibility to do so. So this is, of course, this year quite dense and quite unique due to the situation. And I thank everybody to have accepted to be involved in that way of very specific learning process, so to say.
And now come the film.
Yeah, and we invited the colleague and ethnographic filmer to do a small film on different local and bottom-up initiatives. So this is a film project, is not yet finished. So he is in the middle, more or less, of this. Not even not in the middle, but it's a series of small pictures, so to say, of small insights of different projects.
Yeah, so just a bit more on the program.
Yeah.
So that was a bit of our welcome and introduction, that we have a bit of a background what's going on. We'll now show a short film about 2 to 3 local initiatives from Vienna. And after this, we have a short break for 5 minutes or so. And at 3 o'clock, we'll then start with the first real session, which is about bottom-up strategies to climate adaptation and mitigation. And we'll have 2 case studies in that session that will start at 3 o'clock CET. That session, after the films, will be again introduced very, very briefly by Christoph and me. Then we'll have short statements by the faculty, by the international experts, to open the field. Then we'll have 2 case studies. And then afterwards, we'll have a discussion with the faculty about the case studies. That is the program that will be from 3 to 5 o'clock this afternoon. Okay, but we'll finish this introduction now with a short film about recent initiatives regarding to climate adaptation in social housing in Vienna.
Okay.
For some examples for what's happening here. And that was the end of the introductory session. We now have a very short break. It's now 1 minute to 3. We allow people to join and to come in for a few minutes, and we'll start with the presentation at 5 minutes past 3. We'll start with the session on local and bottom-up strategies to climate adaptation and social housing. Thanks for joining us on all channels for this introductory session, and see you in 5 minutes.